Hey, I'm Christina Rhea, and welcome to Breaking Out of Breaking In, a practical filmmaking podcast about taking your creative career into your own hands and making great work that gets seen without playing the Hollywood game.
Or at least while changing the rules. I'm Brie Castellini, your other co-host, and today we are breaking down directing branded content with guest B. Monet. Before we dive in, remember we release bonus content for each episode we record over on patreon.com/breakingoutpod if you want to support us and get yourself even more info and resources. But without further ado, B, please introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you make? What do you love?
Yeah. Oh my God. I love you guys' intro. I'm just like, yes, all the things.
Everybody getting amped.
Yeah. I'm pumped. I'm excited. I am a writer, director. I kind of direct things sometimes. Yeah. I've been doing this for a little while now. I'm so excited to be doing just be a storyteller. I'm from Maryland originally and have been in New York for a while now. Kind of travel back and forth because of working with a lot of brands. But yeah, I just really want to also get more into my narrative bag because I really miss that. And I can't believe many moons ago, I met Christina from Indie Works and basically my short film won that year. Oh my God, I think it was 2014 or 2015. So long ago now, but just appreciate all the things that you've been doing just in general and always just being a community advocate and making sure that filmmakers feel it's possible to do what you were doing because sometimes there's such a miseducation on how to get started. So I love what you're doing. So
thank you. And I love what you're doing.
So you said you've been doing this branding content for a little while now. How long, when was your first branded content job of any kind?
Yeah, I would say in 2018, so just a few years, but I always wanted to kind of figure out how to do commercials, how to do music videos. I grew up watching, TRL and 106 in Park. So I definitely grew up in that kind of short form content situation. Not to say that I wasn't watching movies too, but just always loved shorter form also. But it felt like a really hard nut to crack when it came to trying to figure out how do you get into this space, because what drives me crazy with talking to a lot of executive producers and heads of productions at different companies is that they're yeah, this person has a short film and they've done many short films, but they don't have, a small sample, they don't have a commercial, a spot. And so it's just yeah, but they obviously can tell a story in a longer format. Why don't you allow them to do a shorter format? And so my opportunity that first came to get into this world is when I was engaged by Girl Gaze to do a short film, a branded film with Levi's about Tarana Burke. That's who I pitched to them. Basically what they asked me is that, do you have an idea? We're trying to do something for Women's International Month about just empowering women who are just doing great things in the world. And I was just well, why not have a Black woman who literally created this movement so long ago and didn't think that it would, be what it was. But I was just yeah, she would be a great person to highlight. So, yeah.
So how did you get connected to the people to the point where you were able to pitch and that all came together?
Yeah, I think it was just honestly just being at the right place at the right time. I was trying to work with Girl Gaze at the time. And so they were just they approached me about this opportunity because it ended up being a few films. And so they're just would you want to at all, do this opportunity? And so what I had to do from there is I actually got into my resources and I was just who knows Tarana? Because I didn't technically know her. So I went on Facebook, did a little bit of investigating journalism, and it was just kind of oh, Marta, a director I worked for, I DP'd a feature doc. She knows this woman somehow. One of the interviewees knew Tarana. So basically, Marta put me in touch with Miss Joanne. Miss Joanne knows Tarana. So that was my kismet, what is it, under 6 degrees of separation that connected
I was
us
just going to
together.
say, yeah, the 6 degrees of Toronto Burke.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. That's a really great title.
That's the subtitle for this episode.
Yeah, please.
That's interesting that you were the one that had to make the connection. So is it that you had been like trying to find a project to work with on Girl Gaze? They eventually had an opportunity for you, and then you pitched and they were like, cool, if you can get Toronto Burke, you're in. Was that kind of how that process looked?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think how it usually works is more so like the company would approach talent because they're such a big arm, and then they would say, hey, Reese Witherspoon, hey, Toronto Burke, hey, whomever, we have this project, yada, yada, yada. But I think they wanted us to kind of like already have kind of an established relationship, kind of, sort of, and then they could come on and see, if there was any engagement that needed to happen. But yeah, it was interesting because it was my first time. So I didn't really know like what was the proper protocol. And I feel like that's just been the whole thing with my career anyways. Like even with going to NYU, I feel like there's so many things that I didn't learn from film school.
Can you expand on that? What things
Sure.
do you think were like big missing parts of your education?
I mean, learning how to form an LLC, learning about taxes as a creative, learning how to like get a commercial. Like, yes, I took a commercial class, but he didn't really teach us, unfortunately, at the time, how to really like get in front of like companies or like, it was just the whole thing of like create a spec commercial. But what I tell people is don't create a spec commercial, actually go down the, rabbit hole of Instagram or rabbit hole of Twitter. There are a lot of startup and like new companies that don't have any videos, and ask them, hey, can I direct something for you? Instead of like creating a spec commercial for Adidas or Nike. Like, of course, these are places that anybody wants to work for. They're very sexy companies, but like the reality of the thing is you might not work with a Nike just at first. Right. So it might be better to just like work with more, realistic companies at first. It's not to say that couldn't happen, but it, it's the thing of like proving yourself. People need to prove that you can even tell a story in a short format to then even allow you to like work with bigger companies like that. So
sure. And do storytelling on behalf of a brand, which is I'm sure a whole other can of beans that we'll get into.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Which is why I'm kind of like wanting to help people get into this space, but it's also just really, I think for me, I'm just wanting more control, like as a filmmaker. And I think it's just interesting because yes, you need to pay the bills and that kind of thing. But I'm looking to I think sometimes with branded content, a lot of companies are not very creative. And a lot of the people that are giving you feedback are not necessarily creative people. And they will like choose the most uninspiring shot. Like they'll choose the close up on someone's face, like a pimple on the side. And they're like, yes, but the product is about skincare. So we have to see that pimple. But why couldn't we have seen them in this sweeping wide, like walking through, and maybe we like cut into the pimple, not just close up after close up after close up.
Right,
so
right.
It's just, I don't know. It's a very interesting lane sometimes,
No, I bet. So let's talk about that as a lane. So first of all, this is something we like to talk to our guests about. Are you making your living primarily through branded content or a combination of other freelancing gigs?
I'm making my living mostly as like a freelance director. So that includes documentaries, that includes commercials, branded content, all of that, and a little bit of consulting, not as much, but mainly, as a director. And I feel like I'm so lucky to even be making a living as a director, because I know a lot of classmates of mine or just people who've attended film school. Some of them have just kind of like, I feel like given up on the whole process. And, it's just really interesting how tables flip and turn, because I definitely at NYU wasn't considered like a person that was going to make it, quote unquote. I was not necessarily one of the proteges or one that people were looking out for or even mentoring. So it's just interesting how the people who were the favorites of the class aren't necessarily, I guess, the favorites in the world, or just, I don't know. It's just not that I'm a favorite, but it's just I don't know, it's just interesting how it all works out.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, there's such an element of randomness. There is never a point where you can say, definitively my career is over, or it is perfectly working out the way I expected. You just kind of got to roll with it. Okay, cool. So with that, can we talk about money for a second? So like
Sure.
how, when specifically for branded content, we'll branch out in a second, but specifically for branded content, how do you tend to get paid? Is it an hourly fee? Is it a lump sum, deferred? Like what is the payment process like for this kind of content?
Well, most of the time people approach me and say, hey, there's a brief that because I'm a freelance director, I work with different companies.
Sure.
So they come to me basically usually through my Squarespace account, and they're saying, hey, B, is it okay if we have a call real quick? We want to put you up for this job. And then we get on a call, we talk about it, we talk about budget, we talk about timeline, we talk about doing a treatment and a creative call. The creative call is just basically when the creatives walk you through their vision for the project, because basically you as a director in the commercial and branded space is more so you're in service to, I would say, that brand or that client. It's not necessarily about your vision necessarily or you being so artistic. It's more so like
Sure.
You are hired because you're considered an expert or, at least good in this job or good at this job. So it's like, okay, you're good at this job. Let's hire you. Let's see if you can do it. So from there, then it ends up usually being a triple bid situation where it's you against two other directors. Sometimes it can be more. What every director loves is to have a single bid situation where it's just, a company is coming straight to you and saying, we only want you to direct this. Can you do it based upon the dates, the budget, the concept, whatever. But in a triple bid situation, you do a treatment, which is like a beautiful PowerPoint presentation walking through how you as a director would do this thing. You talk about tone, you talk about vision, you talk about story, you talk about visual references, other things like wardrobe, makeup, whatever. And then after that, you have a call with the agency. The agency is basically kind of like the middleman between you and the client. Sometimes the client may be on the call. It depends. Then they decide if they want to go forward with you. If they end up going forward with you, then you end up shooting the commercial. Then the commercial could be a day shoot, it could be a week, it could be a few days, whatever. Usually then after you shoot it, it's almost like you might get paid. It really depends on the company. You could get paid like 12 to 15 days after, depending on how the company's system works. It could be a net 30. Usually I get paid very quickly, like after I direct something, it might be like the production manager's just like, hey, where should I send what billing information? I need your billing information. So then I send it to them, and either it's a direct deposit situation where it goes straight into my account, or it's a situation where it comes to me, like my mailing address. So yeah, but budgets range. Like budgets could be, like when I was first starting out, they started more lower, but now because I've been doing it for a few years, they've gotten up there. I've never worked with like a budget that's like $1.2 million or something, but I hope that it's coming one day. But most of the budgets that I'm working in are kind of like the 6-figure range. And so how that works is usually you as the director get 10% of that budget. So if it's like, I don't know, 400K, you should get 40K as the director.
Got it.
But what people also are trying to do is sometimes I feel like with creators of color or filmmakers of color, they're still trying to lowball us in terms of like the budget. So even with a 400K budget, they might say to you, oh, well, can you take 20? Or can you take 22, even though you're deserving of 40? So it's just kind of like, these are things that I feel like, again, film school, they don't really, I don't know, like they teach
you the negotiation aspect and the fact that it's not even across the board in terms of your starting negotiation bid.
Right. Yeah. Or even like I get really mad because there's a commercial that I did like in 20, I had to really think about that, in 2020, at the end of 2020, but because I'm not union, I don't get residuals on that. But every time I hear this commercial, it drives me insane because I got basically like, I guess you could say like almost like a day rate, like for each day I got paid this and then I ended up kind of like getting a lump sum of like what, like a final rate from that. But then when I hear this commercial, it just reminds me of like the fact that I kind of wish that I was union because I could be getting more money for this thing that I'm hearing all the time. So, sure. But there's also a thing of being union of like, that comes with its own bag too, because you have to pay union fees and yes, you get health insurance and a lot of benefits, but I think sometimes what makes me a little nervous about becoming union is I think, you know, it feels like sometimes a lot of people are jaded in the union space, as opposed to non-union. People are still hungry and still happy and still so grateful to be, I guess, even a part of something. And I feel like sometimes, you know, you have a lot of people who are capable in the union and like they've been doing this for years, 30 plus years, but they just seem so checked out. And it's just like, ooh, like to be around so many checked out individuals, I'm not gonna lie, it does make me a bit nervous. So
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I was gonna ask about if these were like union rates or not. So are you not able to negotiate for residuals if you're outside of the union? Is that just a standard not thing they offer?
Yeah, it's just so tricky because it's just kind of like, because you're not in the union, you don't have to be paid union rates. But then if you become union, you're really not supposed to take non-union jobs. So that and if you do take it's like, if you do take a non-union job as a union, it's like almost like it's a penalty if they find out, but then you could also be credited. Basically, it's like a hiding situation. You could be credited, like I could use a different name. Like B. Monet is my stage name. I could technically use a different name and be credited as like the creative director. And so if I was credited as the creative director, they can't come back and be like, oh, we can penalize you.
That's very interesting. So given that trepidation that you have about sort of like the vibe and community of the union and sort of the inflexibility, but also the collective bargaining power, the ability to maybe get a little bit more that you deserve. Like for you, what is the decision going to come down to in terms of joining the union eventually or not?
I think it would be like if a TV project or narrative project came across my desk that I really am passionate about. And I feel like, yes, I'm the perfect person to tell this story. And I can really also kind of like, I guess I would say just be very careful and thoughtful about crew. That would be awesome, because I feel like what's interesting about that film that screened at IndieWorks so long ago is because I felt safe. I felt like I was around people that I could create with. And I feel like it's just been interesting to navigate this space, you know, not really always feeling like I can talk to people about it. Because if I talk to people and I say, hey, yes, I'm directing a whole bunch of commercials and yes, it's making me a great living, but I don't always feel happy with like the end product, people think I'm complaining. So then I don't feel like they're a safe space for me to like talk to, because they just think that I'm moaning and groaning. And it's like, I'm not moaning and groaning. I think it's okay to be like, I want more as a storyteller, but you know, you just have to like choose your battles. But yeah, community is just so big for me. And I'm just trying to figure out how to be intentional and how to really figure out like who can really be a part of my tribe when it comes to like making these longer form projects. Cause I think I'm just always a pay it forward person, but I feel like sometimes the people that I choose don't come from the same like ethos. And so it ends up being a thing of, I feel crushed because I feel like here I am holding out the baton to you, but I don't know if you would do the same for me. And so that just really, it's just sticky, because it's like you want to pay it forward with people, but I don't know if they always want to do that, you know, for me. So
yeah, it's hard to know until that circumstance comes up. And at that point, it's sort of it's either too late or, oh, good, this worked out.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people just think directing is easy. I think they just think, oh, like it's just like telling people action. They don't realize it's a lot of people management and egos, and like the way that I speak to the production designer might be completely different than how I'm speaking to my DP. And I just don't think that people realize that it's a lot of like negotiating constantly. And like, if you don't like something, you don't, to me as a director, scream on set and yell at everybody. You pull somebody to the side and you have a one-on-one conversation, woman to man, woman to woman, whatever. But yeah, it's so much more than just saying action. You know what I mean? It's, you know, it's, and I just don't think people realize that. And I don't know how to communicate that. But I also am like, you know what, you think you can direct, go for it. Like, you know, like, not that I'm not here to mentor you, but sometimes people just don't hear you until they have to face it themselves.
Absolutely.
Totally. Yeah, it is interesting how like the position of director is sort of deified, and like it's one of the only ones that the Oscars, like one of the only behind the scenes crew positions that the Oscars and like all these award shows mention. But also you're totally right that there are so many misconceptions about just like the act of directing and what it entails that it becomes this very strange, there are two directors we respect and everyone else is just saying action sort of thing, even within the industry when like you're newer and you don't really know what you're doing. And it is very funny to watch that dichotomy, especially because I think, as all three of us know, directing is a lot of things that is not just a matter of like, you know, staying the course and having a vision. So speaking of vision, I wanted to talk to you about these treatments that you're making for the pitch, and also like your way of finding your footing in a project that isn't your own. You know, you're for hire, you're a freelancer, you're coming in with, you said they already have a brief, they already have a creative team put together with a vision. Yeah. So like, what is your first step in finding like, what is the Be Monet version of this commercial?
Yeah, I feel like for me, when I'm on the creative call, I just try to like talk to the creatives and really try to understand what is their inspiration behind this, and try to like tease out and pull out what they're really saying that might not be communicated in the brief. And I think what people sometimes don't do on creative calls is they feel like, oh, I can't ask questions. And that's actually when you should ask questions, just so that they feel like you're interested, you're engaged, you actually want to be here, you know. And if you don't understand something, that's the time to kind of be like, hey, well, is it okay if we pivot in a different direction? Or I know that, you know, you want to shoot this vertically. Is there a way to like maybe have a TikTok component to it? Like, I think my way of like dealing with a lot of things is also to ask a lot of questions. And yeah, I have a lot of ideas always like bouncing in my head. So I'm always like, well, let me just try to run this past the person and even see if that is at all in the direction that they want to go. And if it seems like they're biting a little bit with it, then I'll just, you know, address that in my treatment. For me, also, I think it's important to research their previous work. So if you're working for, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a brand right now, Oreo cookies, I would say if you're going to potentially direct something for Oreo cookies, then you need to study that brand and kind of look and see what they've done before and try to see like what they kind of are missing. And I think that's the thing, is like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you could just be like, okay, well, you've never had a commercial that has this type of person or this type of concept. And so it's me doing my research as almost like an investigative journalist to figure out what is it that they're missing and how can I speak to that. And so then I try to do that in my treatment, try to speak to the approach of like, hey, you know, and using anecdotes, I feel like is always great too, of like, you know, my first memory with Oreo cookies was this, this, and this. And so that they kind of feel like, okay, because people love stories, whether it's, you know, a sermon, you know, a speech, a treatment, people love stories. They love something that makes it feel like the personal is political and it doesn't just feel like, you know, something in the ether. So I would say try to have an anecdote that you can share about your first experience or something with that company, and then finding your spin on it. That spin could be whatever, but for me, my spin is usually the thing that I feel like they're missing or that they haven't tackled. And so it's like, oh, I could be the first person to maybe tackle, you know, the fact that maybe they've never had like, I don't know, a Black woman with an afro who's eating Oreos and like she's on the beach and this and that. Like, trying to figure out what is my identity within this brand and how I hopefully can, bring about more people who I feel like are not really in that space. So that's usually like where I'm coming at with that sort of stuff and, with treatments. So
that's great.
That's really cool. Christina, I feel like I've been dominating the questions. I'll pass it over to you for a sec.
Well, I just had one question going back to the negotiating piece of it. Are you doing that all yourself? Do you have reps who are doing any of that communicating?
Yeah, it's funny because like I'm technically with a company right now, but I also feel like I'll tell him things that I don't like. Like I'll tell him like, hey, I want more money, or hey, like whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like he tries to work with me, but sometimes I don't feel like he's trying enough. So for me, I always feel like, and what I always tell people is no matter if you have, even in the film and TV world, no matter if you have an agent, a manager, a lawyer, an accountant, you still have to be your biggest advocate. So for me, I'm kind of like becoming my biggest advocate always and still. So like I keep on getting work that I feel like is in a certain lane that I don't want to do. So I would also tell people what I did at first is I put a lot of stuff out there, but that's good and also bad because then people think that you are only capable of that one sort of thing. And so once you start to get more stuff on your reel that you feel like is a bit more exemplary or excellent or just a little bit more like maybe a higher production value, I would say to start kind of taking those things off your website and also just hide stuff. Even if it means you have less stuff on your website, it's okay. I have tons of stuff, but it's not on my website. It's in the Dropbox folder. So like, for instance, somebody just called me or texted me asking me about, hey, there's a job that I want to put you up for. And my option, and what I will say is, hey, what is the timeline? What is the budget? What's the concept? And sometimes a lot of people don't like to talk about budget or like over email. So you just get on a call with them and see like what's going on. But I feel like a lot of stuff just comes down to me being my biggest advocate. I would love to be under an arm of support, but I just feel like I haven't really had that in just such a long time. So I just feel like I have to be my biggest everything. And I hope that there are going to be more companies in the future that really do look out, for folks, especially like me, who are still, I wouldn't say that I'm still trying to figure it out. I have figured it out to a certain extent, but it would just be nice to have that support of like having a production company that really supports you from start to finish. From start to finish, I mean, from the concept to then treating, from them. Because what I usually have done is if I'm not designing it, I will have a designer actually design the treatment, and I go back and forth with them in terms of image pulling. They'll pull a whole bunch of images, and then I'll tell them the ones that I like for each page. And then sometimes, we'll have to do a little bit of copywriting or whatever, but it's nice to know what that feels like of just like having a company see you from the call to the treatment phase to the actual big call to like selling yourself. Cause that's really what it is. You're not just selling this concept. You're trying to sell yourself. You're trying to win people over. I feel like Mad Men does a great job of kind of like expressing the ad world and the ad space, because that is exactly what it is. And I think maybe I shouldn't say this, but I am going to say it. I think as a director in the commercial space and the branded space, it'll be better if you care less. Meaning like, because if you care so much, you're going to feel like your heart is broken every freaking time. And it's just kind of like,
you got to protect yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it feels annoying feeling like every time your heart's going to be broken. It's like, no, it's not to say you don't put your energy out there and you want the best thing to happen. But I think you have to kind of approach things almost like actors do. Actors go out for thousands of auditions. They don't get all of the auditions that they go out for. So as a director, you have to kind of like see it as the same thing of like, it's a gamble. You may get it, you may not. But if you don't get it, my thing is like, maybe it went to the person that it was supposed to, and that your opportunity to do something that you really love, it's going to come. Because I think I was so afraid of saying no for the longest time, because I was just like, oh God, like if I say no, am I ever going to get work again? And da 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 da. And now it's just like, no, like this, it's an inconvenience. Like as much as it is a way to support yourself, it's still you doing something in service to someone else. So by nature, it also is inconveniencing your life. So if it's inconveniencing your life, you need to make sure that you are being paid for your services. So
yeah, absolutely.
I know maybe I'm keeping it a little too real, but I just feel like people need to know what's up.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. We appreciate that.
No, I'm 100% an advocate for having an appropriate emotional boundaries between yourself and your work that you do on behalf of other people, certainly, just to protect yourself.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's important, and it's hard not to, you grow up, especially I think like as women, as queer people, as people of color, you grow up thinking I have to work so hard to get even an ounce of what anyone else is getting. And when you work hard, you naturally put your everything into it. And then as you become an adult, you realize, okay, I have trained myself to work hard. I know I have what it takes. And now I have to find a way to work that hard without feeling like it's consuming me. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to like do more than one thing per year. And that does not seem sustainable.
Okay. No, I felt that. I was like, yes, like keep, yes, I need you like, like a voicemail of you just like saying this, because
I mean, I think it's something we've all gone through, especially during the pandemic, where like we don't have anything to distract us from the fact that all we're doing is working and being miserable.
Right.
And maybe we don't want to be that way anymore.
Right? Or even just these companies that I just feel like are so performative. It's like insert a Black person here, a Latinx person here, an Asian person here, a queer person here, a trans person here. But it's like, what are your ethos though? Like, do you actually still care about like changing the infrastructure of your company and your belief system? Like, or are you just saying that to just be performative or hip, or to make sure that you're still getting those dollars from the communities of color that you're exploiting, Right. So it's just, it's a weird place too, to like be a filmmaker, but then to also see what these companies are trying to do. And then also, it's very interesting to get emails being like, we're looking for a female AA, African-American director. We want beautiful emotional storytelling, but the budget is low. Right. So you're telling me you literally want to have all this stuff and you want the world to be just presented in front of your eyes and stuff, but at the same time, you don't want to pay Black people what we deserve. And so it's just, it's not giving.
Let's dig into that then, because I think that's probably a question a lot of people who, it sounds like yourself, obviously prefer narrative, want to tell their own stories, but like the sort of hesitation to go into branded content is the like sort of capitalism of it all, the no ethical consumption or employment other capitalism issue of it all. So how do you navigate that of like, your morals, your ethos, but also your need to eat dinner every night and pay rent? Like, how do you navigate that line? How do you approach that?
I think I haven't always gotten it right? Of just like, I think at the beginning, I was just so happy to just be so, and it's just like, and that's just how capitalism is for people who are other, to be like, you're just supposed to be so humble all the time and so grateful. And it's just like, fuck that. Like sometimes it's just like, you're tired of always being humble and grateful. Yes, you're thankful for the opportunity, but it's like at some point, I mean, are white men saying that? You know what I mean? Are they saying like, oh my God, thanks, dude, for this opportunity? No, they're just like proceeding forward. And so I feel like the rest of us need to do the same, of just like, yes, thank you for this opportunity, but hey, my day rate is this. And I think sometimes, it is uncomfortable, right? As a woman of color, to talk about like money, like to be like, hey, like, I understand, but actually I really am paid this. Like, for instance, Complex reached out to me about doing these really cool portrait pieces on folks, but I was just like, yeah, what you want to pay me for 4 people over a span of time for like 4 of these is actually my day rate for 1 day. So I understand that this is a great opportunity, but I don't think I could articulate that in the beginning of my journey of this, because I was just so damn humble and so happy to be like, you know, like, oh my God,
room at all.
Yes. Like, but it's also like, that's just so annoying. Like I'm just over that. And I guess because I've just directed so much, thankfully, a lot of branded content and commercials, I'm also just like wondering, like, when the budgets increase, when do a lot of things start to look a little bit different? So it's just kind of like, I don't want to be unhappy for the next, you know, couple of weeks, like dealing with people who are harassing you in a way of like, they're emailing you all the time, they're texting like, hey, can we get on a call before, you know, this meeting, as if you haven't pitched yourself. You know, it's just annoying. I don't like being micromanaged as a person. So I just feel like it's just a very hard space to navigate when you feel like you have to always prove yourself, not just like, because I feel like I'm always having to prove myself every time people still can't take in the fact that, you know, a Black woman is directing this. Like, even if they saw my name on the call sheet, they may have never seen any of my work or or just surprised that I can actually direct. It's just insulting, you know what I mean? And just very disrespectful, because I'm sure if I was a white guy or white male, you would have looked at his stuff. But because I'm a Black
you a Jurassic
person,
World or something.
Oh, yeah. Or just, I mean, I had to get into it a little bit with the Steadicam operator for a thing that I did in LA like 2 months ago, or a month ago, because he was just kind of like, well, I don't know what you want. And I had to get snippy. And I don't like getting snippy on set. But in this moment, it was just like, I'm going to match your energy, because I'm not about to have you not do what I need you to do. And this is also this little girl of color this Black girl is so important and like in my community. And I'm not about to have you disrespect that. So if that means that I have to tell you and get a little short with you, then I will, because it was just so frustrating, and not feeling like, again, having an AD, yes, who looked like me, but at the same time, I felt like in that moment, he also wanted to direct. And I feel like this is just a problem that I feel like I keep on running into, where there's just a lot of men and women who look like me and who don't look like me who want to direct. And it's just kind of like, I need you to just do your job. Like, can you just do your job?
Like backseat directing kind of a thing.
Oh yeah. Production designer was like, well, as soon as I would walk out of the room, the talent was nice enough to tell me, oh, as soon as you walk out of the room, she's always just like, well, I would have did it like this, and I would have did it like this, but you're not though. Right. So,
oh my God.
Yeah. And just, you know, like, again, I don't want to paint this negative view of directing, but you do have to woman up. You do have to man up, because I feel like I wear combat boots on set, because I really feel like I'm getting ready for battle, because I always feel like I have to be on. And it's just annoying feeling like you always have to just be on all the time, and you can't ever slip up, or like, God forbid, you know what I mean? So I think that's not the thing that people talk about, because all they see is like you working with these shiny brands and these shiny people or whatever, and they don't realize just all of the minutia of what you have to deal with in it.
Totally. How much control do you have over hiring, either in crew or cast?
Cast, not so much, because I've tried to get plenty of friends who are actors onto stuff. And it's just also very interesting how, you know, clients just choose. And it's just like, it's very interesting, because they'll say one thing of like, hey, we're trying to do better. And I'm like, okay, if you're trying to do better, here's a person that will literally visually and viscerally make sure that people will feel like you're doing better. But at the same time, you still choose a safe approach. You still choose always the safest thing. And it just drives me insane. In terms of crew, I don't mind working with new crew, but sometimes that also can be a good thing and a bad thing, because you might be walking on landmines, meaning like
Sure.
you could work with somebody new, but at the same time, everybody presents themselves to be amazing and great and all this, but you don't really know who you're dealing with until you're in bed with them, almost like. So, you know, I'll recommend people here and there. I'm also always open to working with new people, just because I never want to kind of like, as a director, stay in this lane of like, you know, B. Monet's look always looks like this. I kind of don't want that to be a thing, because I don't want people to feel like they know what is up, like what I'm about to do. Meaning, like, I understand a lot of people love safety and like consistency, but I guess for me and my brain, I kind of like to be creative and like, you know, it's like, for instance, like if I put all of my pictures on Instagram having a green tone, I feel like as an artist, I should be able to then change it up and put an orange tone, you know, video or picture. But I think sometimes in commercials, people are just so very rigid, and they cannot conceive that the person who does car commercials could then do beauty. Like, you literally have to show them that you can do beauty for them to literally think that you can do beauty. It's not because you can't, it's just they can't conceive of it unless they see it spelled out. So that's something you have to know about getting into this space, that if you want to go into certain things like fashion, beauty, cars, branded, you kind of have to kind of show that. And that's what's always hard, is getting the first thing. And so the first thing is kind of, I think, the hardest, but then once you get that, I think it really helps. So like I said, I think people should definitely reach out to companies directly, like smaller companies on Instagram, on Twitter, say, hey, or startups, Black businesses, whatever, you know, any type of business that they're like, they feel like they could kind of elevate their look and feel and be like, hey, I want to do this. It might cost you, meaning like you might have to put up the money for a camera, or ask your friends also for favors and just be like, yo, I'll treat you to a very nice dinner and a movie, but I need you to do this thing for me. So, yeah.
I mean, it kind of goes back to the thing you said at the very beginning of this conversation about you're going to be dealing with a lot of people who are not creatively, you know, talented necessarily. And it comes back to like the perception. And I feel like we've had this conversation with a handful of our guests at this point, where not just in commercials, but in all aspects of film and TV and entertainment, is people want you to pick a lane, and then they cannot perceive you going any like step outside of that lane, because they're like, no, you're the this person. So just do that over and over and over again. How can we know that you can do this other thing, which utilizes all the same skills, but is different? You haven't done that before. So can you? And it's frustrating to have to constantly be proving things that you've already proven a million times.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. No, because it's just, sometimes it just makes you feel like, what does this industry want? You know, like how many diversity panels do you have to be on? How many hashtags do you have to use before people really get it? Because I don't think it's that hard also for folks to like get, like, even though that's a different conversation, but I just feel like it's in tandem with what you said of like, if you're a dude, you can just do anything, I feel like. And that's of any color. I just think with women, it's a little bit different, where it feels like, oh, well, she, like, even another woman told me my name was on a desk for some narrative project. And she was just like, oh, well, you're the doc girl. And I was just like, excuse me? Like, yes, I do documentaries, but that doesn't mean that I don't do narratives as well. But it was just so annoying to hear that feedback, that, you know, again, what you're saying is that she literally thought, you know, well, she's a documentary girl, so that's all she can do. And it's like, no, I'm so capable of so much more. I just need the chance. I need the opportunity. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hear from both of you on this, like how we navigate, how like anyone is supposed to navigate this industry complexly. You know, with something that we talk about a lot with our TV writer guests have been, you know, a lot of them were writer directors in the indie world and have transitioned to just writing or just directing, and like why they had to decide. And most people who ended up going one way or another said someone told them they needed to pick a lane. And so they committed and went with that. how do we get to a place where we don't have to pick a lane, whatever those lanes that we want to be on are, for both of you? Is there anything that we can brainstorm right now, three smart filmmaking women, that makes us not have to package ourselves smaller and smaller so that we're hireable,
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about that for a while, so I don't know if you want. Maybe Christina, you go.
I mean, I feel like we bring it up a lot on the podcast, and I personally just sort of refuse to be put into a box. But that means I'm in a situation where I'm not necessarily trying to be hired. I'm trying to get my work funded. And so it's sort of a different realm where I don't really want to play that game. Like we say in the intro, I'm more on the side of not wanting to play the Hollywood game, where I really want to tell the stories I want to tell. And I choose the path of convincing people to give me the money to do it, as opposed to trying to convince people to pick me for the stories they want to be told, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also in a privileged position to be able to do that. I have a spouse who has a good income, and so I can say no to things, and I can take the time to, again, try and convince people to give me money. Whereas some people just have to go for the stuff that's hiring and fit into boxes, and that's not I don't shame anyone for making the choices they have to make, because we are living under capitalism, and we want to get to a point where we can tell our stories, and sometimes you do have to start by telling the stories others want you to tell. And I think doing it the way that you're doing it, where you bring yourself to it as much as you can, and then getting to a point where you're able to say no and start having more control. And yeah, I think everyone's path is different, and I think really it's just when you're in it and when you're on the other side of it, being as open and transparent as possible, which is, what we try to do on the podcast, so that we can try and change it, so that for the next people coming in, there's more space to be themselves and to carve their own path.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, Christina, and about the transparency aspect, because I do think that so much of the misconceptions that you've talked about and that we've talked about many times on the podcast come from not a lack of information, but a lack of people being open with information that does exist. Mm-hmm. If we hadn't talked to you, we wouldn't know that it is standard to get 10% of the budget for a director on a branded shoot. If I went out for a branded shoot tomorrow and they offered me 2% of the budget that was in the six figures, I'd be like, wow, I'm set for life, because no one would have told me that. Yeah. And I do think that keeps us all trapped without that solidarity, without that community that you were talking about before.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think it's okay to get it wrong so that you can get it right. Right. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think maybe that's the thing with film, that you kind of have to, the best way to learn is just kind of to throw yourself out into the wind and see what happens. But then you can take inventory and be like, is this working for me still? It's okay to be to retreat and not just go after things just because it sounds great, or it's oh my God, this sexy, shiny brand is reaching out to little old me. But it's they're reaching out to you because you're dope and you're amazing. So I think it's also changing the narrative to be I'm not like this, this small shriveled up thing, but literally opening up and expanding your palette. And so to me, what we can do is, having conversations like this, I think are really important. I think also making work that matters to you, not waiting for a studio or brand or a company to say, hey, in there, do you want to make this thing? Just make it on your own. Even if it means that you kind of have to wear multiple hats. I think if you have more control and you appreciate and you love what you do, I think that that's important. I just think about when I first came to New York and how green I was, and just how happy I was with just making stuff. And I was just kind of just always making things, and how, life and getting older, things change and shift. But I think I'm wanting to kind of get back to that older part of myself that was just like making things and just being creative. And whether someone saw it or not, that wasn't really the point. Long as I was doing and creating, that's what's important. Because I think as like multidisciplinary artists, that's really what what we're set out to do. We need to be creating, but we also need to have community. So I think people need to also be real about their resources and about their power and about, can you recommend, people for this job? Like I've done that. I literally recommended a mentee of mine for plenty of things. She was just like, thank you for having this company. Reach out to me. They didn't end up going with her, but that's not the point. The fact of the matter is I really want to walk the walk and talk the talk. And I think that comes from being like, it can't just be me, if like it's the Issa Rae thing of like looking around and being like, yeah, I want my friends here. If it's already a daunting career field, it would be nice to have real allies who are really willing to get into the trenches with you and not just people who surfacely talk about it. So I think those are some of the things we can do.
And that's also another reminder to everyone to like, hey, don't be a dick on set. Because, that Steadicam operator, I bet you're not recommending them for many jobs afterwards, or that production designer. And it's like, even if you think that they're out of the room, if you talk shit, that's gonna come back around. And the film industry feels vast, but is actually very small. So, maybe just be a good person. And who knows, maybe that'll be the trick.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's the Libra in me that's like, I'm kind, but do not try it. Like, meaning like something like if I walked away from that experience being like, yeah, you're really talented, but you made me feel a certain way, then for me, I don't want to proceed with working with you or contribute. Like, I don't think us collaborating would be beneficial. So I think let's just stop it at the one time deal. And let's just, I wish you well on your journey. Hopefully you wish me well on mine. It's okay. No love lost, but we will not be working together. That's
right. Well, it's like the difference between like niceness, kindness, and retribution, I guess, is the third one. Like niceness is you recommend them just because you feel like it's the right thing to do. Kindness is you treat them politely and with respect and then move on your way. And retribution, or whatever the final word would be, is like, I'm going to destroy your life. And it feels like maybe the middle road is the best one, where it's like treat everyone with respect and kindness. Know when, it doesn't need to go further than that. You don't need to go out of your way for somebody who's been rude to you, but you also don't need to go out of your way in the other direction and destroy them. God.
Yeah, that's a good one. I feel like we need to put that like on sets, or just, the AD when they're like, introducing everyone's name, like, okay, is this going to be a nice set, a kind set? Retribution, you know what I mean? Like,
is this the Hunger Games of a branded shoot?
Yeah, that's love that. I really love
Is this
that.
to the death? Okay. The last question was going to be interview and like application tips, but I feel like you've already given us a lot of those. Like find a story that connects you to the piece. So you're not just giving like, taking them away in a story, but introducing them to why you are the right person to tell it. Right. And then building a treatment that acknowledges what they've done before and shows how you can provide them with something that feels reminiscent, but is unique and, whatever.
What they're missing.
Is there any other interview or application or treatment tips that you can offer to anyone wanting to get into the branded space?
Yeah, this is trying to think. Talked about research, talked about, like just looking and just reassessing, like what does the brand not have and how you can speak to that. I think if you ever have any additional questions, don't feel like you can't, like, again, reach back out to them. And if you're maybe newer in this space, and if you don't really like a whole bunch of like public speaking, then maybe also like practicing your pitch with the producer beforehand might be helpful, so that they can maybe give you feedback on like, oh, like, what's going to happen here? You know what I mean? And they can kind of just give you, it doesn't still mean you'll get the job, but it might just be nice to have that feedback so that they know, okay, what's happening, or what's happening, or where kind of like the weaknesses are and the strengths are. And you can just kind of like amplify that for the next round. So that might be I guess the only thing that I can think of. Well, and if there's someone that you really admire who's in the space and you're like you really love their work, maybe reach out to them and ask them if they wouldn't mind, like, speaking for 30 minutes. Yeah. And like
How
pay
do
for people's
you
coffee.
find out who's in the space? Because like most commercials don't have, directed by. Music videos do now more and more. But like, yeah, how do you even find out who's behind a cool spot?
Well, I mean, Instagram, you can also just like go down the rabbit hole and just kind of like follow other directors, creators, DPs. Sometimes, a lot of DPs will also tag. They'll be like, yours truly, and then they'll have all the other people who are in. So I would start like tracking people through Instagram. Twitter, not so much, because I don't really feel like people really use Twitter for like their reels and stuff, but Instagram and TikTok, sure, certainly. But then there are other resources like Free the Work, where you can go on Free the Work, you can create a platform, and you can also see other like specialties and disciplines. Like if you're looking for a colorist or looking for a DP or looking for an editor, you literally can go on this website. You can sift through who you're trying to look through, and then you can kind of look over their work. And again, just reach out to people. I guess my brain is like very research based because I wanted to be a journalist a long time ago. So Google is still your friend. And I think sometimes people forget that. Like literally you could just be like, I don't know, queer director in Philippines, or like Black, Latinx, whatever. You know what I mean? Comedic directors for, commercials or whatever. And I think, or maybe, keep it sometimes less, specific and just keep it more broad, but just maybe just say comedic directors US and see what you find. And then you might find a whole bunch of people that you didn't even know existed. But there's so many databases now, like even, cinematographers XX, Bid-Black is really great. God, there's so many. Brown Girls Doc Mafia is great also. What is it? New York women filmmakers.
That's a great point, is like, do the work. And also once you find one director, one DP, they're going to lead you to so many others, because most people don't work in silos. They work with a great variety of people. So once you know one person, it becomes a lot easier to learn two more people, and on and on and on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, literally just go down the rabbit hole and, get out of the rabbit hole at some point, because, it's so easy to just stay there. But once you find people that kind of resonate with your style or your look and feel, or just even people who you feel like they have the same ethos, they may come from the same cultural community that you come from, reach out, see if they're willing to, like, again, have a coffee with you and pay for the coffee. Don't assume, like, be respectful, because people just sometimes don't have that etiquette of like, you know what I mean? Like, you literally want someone to come out of their house, wash their funky tail, go out, you know what I mean, to meet you. So
they're doing you a favor.
Right. So you need to, act accordingly and pay for a $5 coffee or whatever. I mean, come on, like that's no big deal, especially if they're going to give you a wealth of knowledge. So
sure. Yeah, it's literally the least you can do.
And even if they don't, like, and if they're like, I'm good, just be like, well, I got you on the next one. I'm taking you out. Like, just, I think sometimes generosity also can get you a lot of places. And I think a lot of filmmakers, sometimes artists, don't always come from that space, because it's this scarcity mindset of like, I can be the only one and da, 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 da. And you don't realize that sometimes just opening your heart a bit more, still having boundaries, but opening your heart can allow for some beautiful things to like come forward. So, yeah.
So I just wanted to wrap it up by talking a little bit about your own kind of passion projects and how if you're able to find balance there with the for hire work and actually making the stuff that your heart desires, and how you find that balance, and maybe what's next for you in that space.
Yeah. Y'all coming with the questions, man. Woo woo. No, I'm happy to be writing, going back to narrative work. I'm writing kind of like a psychological thriller right now. I wrote
Oh,
it
awesome.
so long ago, like as a short story, but now I'm actually trying to like tease out and trying to like really understand, more of the plot, and because it was just a short story. So now I have all of this extra time and space to live with these characters. So I'm really excited about that. And then, I don't know how much I can talk about this other project, but I am working on a feature documentary. So we are going to begin filming soon and hope to be done with post this year. And then we'll see what happens with that. And then, I do commercials still here and there, but I am being more intentional. Like this year is my year of like, no more Miss Nice Girl, of like, yes, I appreciate the opportunity, but if it doesn't really resonate with me anymore, I just, I think the pandemic has made all of us just have to reassess things, whether we want to or
Absolutely.
not. And even in a capitalistic society, you can say no. It just may mean that you might have to do other things to supplement your income. Like, for instance, I've always also wanted to always teach. So yes, I love, the fact that branded stuff is very quick. Like usually you're doing stuff, whether it might be like a day, like shooting for a day, or like maybe a week. None of my stuff has ever been like too long, like at most a few days. And then you get paid. Like that's what's really nice about that world. But I'm just like reassessing like what does life look like now and what really speaks to me. And if it doesn't speak to me, like it's okay to say no, and it's okay to like just cultivate my gifts again. Like, really love photography and love teaching, and, always wanted to DP. So I'm just like, maybe those are ways to kind of like supplement, some of this energy. So I don't know.
That's wonderful.
Still figuring
I love that.
it out. I'm still figuring it out. I think that's the thing, is like 10 years from now, I don't know, like a year from now, who knows? Like, I think that's what's kind of cool about this industry, is that you have so much time to kind of like grow and evolve, and maybe to be like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. And that's okay,
Absolutely.
So. Yeah.
Dreams can change, and that doesn't mean that like you're being unfaithful to your younger self. It just means that you've grown up, and that's also valid and true.
Right.
Yeah, we're always growing.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, B. Monet, so much.
Thank
where
you,
can people be finding and following you? We'll obviously put some links in the episode description, but from your mouth to our ears, where should people go if they want to follow all the cool stuff that you're doing next?
I would say my Instagram, definitely. I'm not as active on Twitter, but on Instagram, my handle is direct her, B. Monet. So the pronoun her, not director, but direct her. And then on Twitter, I am B. Monet Worldwide. I had to think about that because I'm like, hold on.
Yeah, that's not really where the visual folk. Twitter is for the writers. Instagram is for everyone else, basically.
Yeah. And I have TikTok, but I still have not posted anything. But I do enjoy the platform. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how eerily it gets to your core before you're like, you know too much.
Yeah.
I need to leave, because I'm getting to that point where I'm like, I don't like how well you know me.
Right?
This feels uncomfortable.
How dare you speak exactly to my soul like this?
I am not on TikTok to be perceived TikTok. I am here to perceive other things. This is not what I was looking for. But TikTok is a whole other bag of beans, of cans, whatever. Thank you so much, B. Monet.
Yes, thank you.
We're excited to see where you go next.
Yeah, and I'm excited for y'all too. So thank you again for having me. And I hope that I told the folks a little bit of things that they could take home. I don't know.
You did. You absolutely did.
100%.
Yeah, people are going to love this. It's been so helpful. Thanks so much to Kelsey Rauber for our theme music, Kaylee Brown for our podcast art, Ezra Lee for editing this episode, and to all of you for listening. Links to learn more about them and our guest are in our episode description.
And thank you to our Booby VIPs, who are our $10 supporters on Patreon, including Kim Garland, Amanda Blunt, Anthony Epp, Kelsey Rauber, Norman Steinberg, Jerry Maravilla, and Brandy Nicole Payne. If you want your name on that list and or to have access to our bonus resources related to each and every episode, you can subscribe for as little as $3 to our Patreon at patreon.com/breakingoutpod.
Or join our free newsletter where we share a new creative prompt each month. Next episode, we'll be discussing filming for found footage. Be sure to tune in.